How nice to be asked to give this talk. My wife Carolyn and I have recently moved to the Heights, and I'm somewhat embarrassed to say that I have not yet been in this incredible facility and church. It's truly, there's so many things yet to discover about the new neighborhood. I always cringe a little, actually more than you might think, when I'm described as the designer of Brooklyn Bridge Park, because it has been such an incredible team effort, both from within my office, where many of you have met Matt Urbanski and Paul Seck and Gulliver Shepard and Steve Noon and Dorothy Tang, and so many who have contributed so much, and that's the tip of the iceberg. Nick Elkovich, many, many others. But it's not an MVVA thing either. There's 31 consultants that have worked on the project, and now there's an amazing group of people headed by Regina Meyer, who are the group that are giving order to the management and governance of the park. Regina's here tonight, and I'm so glad you're here, Regina, to share. And then there's this, well, it feels a little, just a touch funny to talk about the design of a park that has its first, almost third completed, or nearly so, down on the waterfront. So hopefully this is the last time that there's a talk about the design of the park before all of you actually can go in, and that will be fairly soon this spring. But there is a huge, hundreds of people that are down there building the park and have been for 2 years. And so it's just an incredible inner group, but then I know many of the faces in the room because I've actually been working on this project for 12 years in one way or another. I worked for John Ashuler as a consultant to urban strategy, so I was like a tertiary consultant on what was eventually the 2000 master plan. So I've gotten older and definitely shorter as the process has moved along. That's my wife's nice way of referring to my waist. But I wanted to say something about park making and then take you through a walk through the park. And I was asked by Tom to also show a couple of images of other projects of ours to put the work in context. And I always think these things are better if they're like about 45 minutes rather than 2 hours. So I'm going to try for that as well. But now I don't have my watch. So go like this, if it's really treacherous. The philosophical part of this lecture is that democracies are very complicated forms of government, but I think everybody in this room certainly believes that it's the form of government that we believe in. And I think that a park is, in a way, the most extraordinary manifestation of a group of people collectively trying to shape the world that they live in. And I've probably been, since 1998, to something on the order of 250 or 300 neighborhood meetings. I started to say that's how I know many of the faces in the room, and many faces that aren't in the room as well. So it's been an incredible process of working towards what the park should be. I also want to say that the people have enjoyed the outdoors, and in urban areas for centuries there have been forms of outdoor space where people have used landscape as a place to connect themselves to the outdoors, to exercise, to recreate, to have poetic thoughts, all the kinds of things that go on in a park and all the things that we're trying to do in Brooklyn Bridge Park. But that, as history evolved, the idea idea of a park in the civic sense was born here in New York City by a group of politicians and intellectuals together who came up with the idea of Central Park and had a competition that, as we all know, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux were the winners of in 1857. But the idea of the importance of parks in urban life was invented here in New York City at the time that all the other institutions of a good city were invented, and that the rest of the world would eventually partly emulate from the New York example. I mean, sanitations and roads and museums and libraries, but parks were right there. The notion of a park system, the need for recreational space in the city, started in New York in the late 1840s and through the 50s, leading to Central Park, which is described as Olmsted and Vaux's most important park, and then, of course, and now I say it with even more pride, and Prospect Park is their greatest work of landscape architecture, because they got to come over here in 1865 and begin thinking of the whole idea a second time, and it's wonderful to know them both. So I want to get started. Adrian, I'm going to come out so I can actually see what's on the screen. Okay, great. So anybody remember this? I asked somebody in the audience, and she's an attorney, so I know he told me the truth. He said this was from the 80s. But it says park here, and it points to a design, one of many designs that happened on this site. And I wanted to use this as a place of jumping into the talk and saying a little bit about how incredibly dynamic and transitory the water edge of Brooklyn has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. It will go through sort of quickly a series of images of, many of you know these, but of the Brooklyn waterfront, and then what the plan of Central Park was. Of course, when Central Park was planned where it was, the city at the time sort of stopped at about 42nd Street, and that was the edge of the city, and that was actually where the rendering plants were, and it was a really very miserable part of the city. And the city grew up around it. I'm going to show a picture next of Prospect Park as well, which also was conceived before Brooklyn was at its edges. I guess, and I've got the populations down there. Of course, we know today that the population of Brooklyn alone is north of 3.75 million people, and that if it was to succeed from New York City, it would be the fourth largest city in the United States. And so I mention that next. I mention that because I think it's interesting that we're working on a park now where the entire city is essentially built up around us. In a way, the idea and the kind of aspirations of a park move forward from the middle of the 19th century, but we're conceiving of this park in an incredibly different moment in the trajectory of urban development, in the kind of urban conditions that are around us, and the kind of things like the BQE, for example, that exert such a strong force on the side of the site. This is the BQE being rebuilt in the 60s. I think everybody knows where we are here. So, one of the things that you can see, of course, is this wildly, rapidly changing architectural condition along the edge. First at the bottom of the hill where Furman Street ends now, and then as area on the other side of Furman was filled into the East River, they started building warehouse buildings, and eventually the piers, which were active until the 1950s and early 60s.